This is a Film Dimension interview. I'm speaking with Louis Paxton today. He is a writer and director, generally filmmaker. Louis, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good, and I'm. What am I doing? I'm doing the same as everyone else, just sitting at home, just trying to keep busy, I suppose. But I'm doing well
Sure.
considering. No, I'm grateful that I can continue to work in some capacity. So I feel kind of lucky from that regard. So yeah, generally I'm fine. I'm okay.
That's cool. That's cool. That's very good. So how did you start with sort of making films? Because every filmmaker seems to have quite a very different way into doing this sort of thing. What's your sort of origins story?
Well, I think I come from a family where we're always massively like into films. We weren't necessarily. My mum was quite creative. My mum was a glass artist. My dad was a social worker, and but they were both just hugely into cinema, and both my grandparents were as well. And we spent a lot of time with our extended family who were all hugely into films. So I was just absorbing so much in that regard, films and TV, and we used to rent. I think we had that record in our local video shop for renting the most videos that anyone else had rented by like thousands. We'd rent,
Wow.
3, 4 a day, and we'd take them in. We just like obsessively. And then, when DVDs came out, I was just buying DVDs all the time. I remember buying like my first DVD was like Deep Blue Sea, which was like 18 quid when it first came out or something. I spent 18 pounds on a DVD of Deep Blue Sea.
You know what? I think that was my first DVD as well. I remember because I saw it in the cinema, and I kind of thought that wasn't all bad. And I remember when it came out. I'm pretty sure that was one of my first DVDs.
I think it's that, and Face Off seems to be a lot of people had that at the same time, but they were all flippers as well. Do you remember you had to flip a DVD? So like get halfway through a movie and then flip it, I was obsessed. And like, I think even before that though, like I remember with my toys, like I had loads of action men, and I was always making kind of films and reenacting scenes from like Aliens and Predator and classics, so 80s and 90s cinema. And I was just like, they all had really elaborate characters and things like that. And it was like, I was using my head as the camera and kind of like moving it around. And I just had, I loved it. And then I think I got to an age where me and my mate, Paddy, started just like shooting stuff in Edinburgh. And we were just doing it to kind of make each other laugh. I think he got a camera first, like a little mini DV thing. And then we did that. And we knew a lot of skaters, and skaters had cameras. So we'd borrow their cameras. And then I think I got to an age where I saved up and I got my own sort of mini DV camera and skits. I think Jackass was a big thing for us, because like that was the first time watching stuff we were like, oh, we could do that. We don't have the production values, but we could could definitely go out and shoot this kind of stuff, and we could make each other laugh. And there was an irreverence to it, which I think is like a young teenage boy, I just really kind of like connected with. So, CKY, Jackass, stuff like that, going out. I think the first thing we made was a thing called, I don't know, can I swear on this?
If you want.
So the first stunt show called Cunts Doing Stunts, and it was just us as a bunch of guys, Scottish guys jumping off things and like hurting each other and stuff like that. But it taught me editing, and it was really, really helpful from that regard. We did a lot of really good edits from that point of view, like and just cutting it to music that obviously we didn't have the rights to and stuff like that. And we never put it online or anything. Sure. But God, we had so much fun, and I learned so much from that. And I think what I really liked was making people laugh. And so I kind of got more into just making comedy films. I went through a route of with no kind of with no real kind of training. And then I did an HNC and an HND because I really screwed up school. I was not very good at school at all. But thankfully I got into this kind of access course at Telford in Edinburgh, and I managed to do a few good films there, which got me onto my next course at the RSAMD, which is now the Conservatoire in Glasgow, and they've got a great film and TV course. And I made my graduation film there, Choreomania, which was a zombie dancing plague in Glasgow. And it was really it's really rough, but it was very ambitious. And I think that kind of got me noticed by a few people, including the NFTS, who I applied to, and I managed to get into the directing course there, which felt just bizarre given my background on what I was doing, going to this really sort of like prestigious school that kind of outputs loads of drama as well. It felt, but I remember the head of the school at the time, Nick Powell, who sadly no more, people to make more comedy. And so I think that's partly why I got in, was because I was kind of very strictly kind of like making comedy films. And then when I was there, I tried a number of different things, and it was a great course, but in many ways I found it quite challenging because I was used to making films quite sort of instinctively. And there was a lot of theory, but there was also a lot of critique, both of which I now realize are hugely important and really beneficial, like to you as a filmmaker. But at the time I had really proud of. I also made some stuff I'm not quite sure about. And then I think after that, I've just gone through everything from beginning to end there. I don't know if that's not or not.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's cool. Again, it builds up an idea of how you got to where you are. No, it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah. And at the time I was in London, so I graduated, I was in London. I managed to get an agent, which was great. And off the back of that, just kind of, was pitching myself as a director. But because I'd made all of my directing sample, it wasn't easy to put me forward for certain jobs. And so I kind of started writing. I'd always written, my own work and or collaborated with people and co-written. But I'd kind of gotten to a point where like I was eager to try writing TV as well. And I wrote my first thing for TV, which managed to get some traction. And then off the back of that, I've kind of been doing more writing for the past sort of 8-10 years since I graduated, really. And I'm still directing stuff, but Neville is Dead, the short that you watched, is the first when I was still living in London. It was 2014. But I think I'm proud of it because I think it kind of unites, like, it's like my old school way of filmmaking, which is like small crews, working with people you really trust and that you've got a really good relationship with, and kind of just capturing that sort of sense of fun about it, and also quite a lot of improv. But I think what it has that my earlier work didn't have was it's much more structured, and I think it's also got a little bit more kind of emotional depth to it, which is something that's definitely come from concentration on writing and structure. So it kind of brings together, everything I've been working on, over the past, to my entire career so far, basically. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, no, I love Neville is Dead. I've put it on the Film Invention, as you know, and I'm promoting it on social media as much as I can. And anyone who may be watching this who haven't seen it, please go and see it. It's very, very good in every level. It's beautifully shot. It looks great. It really does look great. But yeah, the story, it's funny. It has moments that are really, really sort of heartfelt as well. Obviously, I don't want to give away the story or anything, but so many times I try to watch a lot of particularly short films, because that's mainly what I'm putting on the Film Dimension at the moment.
Yeah.
And you come across a lot of. So it's interesting when you say this is kind of like your first short film, or not your first film, but it's kind of like your latest kind of film, other than you doing stuff before. But I come across loads of short films that might maybe have quite big budgets, relatively speaking, or might be their third or fourth film, but it almost seems that they're just doing the same thing over and they're not evolving as filmmakers. That you kind of watch that and you go, "Whoa, okay, well that didn't make sense." Like the story doesn't make sense. It doesn't really do any particular narrative, and like you've gone from here to here, and it's like, well, there's a bunch of stuff happening. Like, Neville is Dead is not that. Do you know what I mean? So it's like it's almost like you've ticked it the box, in my opinion. And it's a brilliant example. Do you want to talk just briefly about the production of that, like the budget you had, time scale, all that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. So it kind of came about from collaborating with an actor I've worked with London to study. So I first worked with him on a film called Pouncer, which is a mockumentary, which I have to like. I really don't punt my own work. I have to say, like, watch that film because I'm really proud of it. And I didn't write it. It was like we came up with the concept, me and a couple other guys, and it's based on when I was a jumper outer on Edinburgh's underground ghost tours. So I was paid to sit underground and just jump out on people, which was the worst job I've ever had, but also thankfully gave me this film. And it's partly just because like we shot it over a weekend and we just made up so much of it as we were going. And I think Grant is just terrific in it. Grant I'd always wanted to work with again, because I think he's so funny. And I think he's also just a really kind of multifaceted actor. He's got he's got so much range to him. And he's got this brilliant ability of being kind of like menacing and really sweet and also really funny at the same time. And I love the whole package. So I met up with him, having come back up to Edinburgh, and we were both saying like we want to make something. We were talking about ideas, and he was talking a lot about his son, who interestingly, when we were shooting that last film we'd made together, he just found out that his wife, was pregnant with his son, who's also called Louis. And so it's weirdly feel like we came full circle. We came back together again, and then we ended up actually casting his son in this film, playing a version of his own. So Louis is actually the actor's real son. It's Grant's son.
Because he's great. He's really good.
I've met him loads of times. Oh, he's fantastic. He's so good, and he's like we both knew he was like really charismatic and really funny and really individual, and so we knew that like he would be great on screen. It was just that we didn't really know how we were going to direct him and how we were going to how that was all going to work. So, but we just took a sort of chance on it and said, and we came up with this idea based around imaginary friends, and it was a story that my mum had told me about her brother who had an imaginary friend when he was young to him, and so my grandfather had to like ritualistically burn him in a fire to get rid of him. Which I just thought was really dark. But then I started going down a route of being like, oh, it could be a horror film. That'd be really interesting. But then Grant said that Louis actually had an imaginary friend, and that Louis's imaginary friend lasted 2 days and then he killed him, or he died, basically. So we just loved this idea of having an imaginary friend that was really disposable, and essentially that imaginary friend not being that fantastic as well. So there was something kind of, I feel like, obviously we looked at like Drop Dead Fred, and, more recently as well, there's been loads of great comedic sort of examples of imaginary friends. But I think what it was Grant's idea was like this idea that he's just a man. Like there's actually nothing that fantastic about him. He's not kind of crazy in any way. He's just a very normal man. And something about that was really funny to us. But then we also looked at like, what he was dealing with, and the boy was dealing with the grief of his father and all that. So it was kind of, the project came from the idea, from our desire to work together again, but also for me to work on something like I used to before I had bigger budgets at school, which were great, but I felt like I got a bit lost in them. And I kind of had disconnected a bit from my voice as a filmmaker. And so I was quite eager just to get back to a situation where like I felt like I could have a bit more control over it and I could play around with things a bit more. And we put our money together. I think it was 2,500 was the shooting budget, so the production budget. So we put in like $1,000 and a bit each. We shot in East Lothian, which is just a stunning sort of Edinburgh. And that was quite important to me as well. Originally I wanted to shoot it up north in Orkney, which is where a lot of my family are from. And I've been going there since I was very young. So there's this very sort of nostalgic feel to me, which was something I was kind of trying to capture. But we looked at that, it was just way too expensive. We couldn't have afforded to travel everyone up there. It was not possible. So I looked at the next best thing and thought like, well, I grew up in Edinburgh. We were going out we often, my family, Saturdays and Sundays, like our trips were kind of just going to the beach. So we would go, even in winter, we went to the beach. A lot of that area is very much part of my kind of childhood geography. It's like we've got because it's on the eastern coast as well. There's loads of tank traps, which you can see in the sort of first couple of scenes when they're playing and they're shooting their guns and everything. These big kind of ton brick concrete blocks. And I remember playing on them when I was really young. And I just think there's something kind of, I love them visually, and I'd not seen them in anything before. But also just like abandoned buildings. Me and my friends spent so much time in abandoned buildings, in Edinburgh and around about locations in East Lothian. And then we shot over 2 weekends. I think the script was actually pretty straightforward. Me and Grant wrote it together and we developed it. I think we didn't do a huge amount of drafts. We did maybe 4 or 5 drafts. And then we did sort of improvise some on set, but actually it's pretty close to what you see. It's quite fast paced as well. So the scenes none of the scenes were that long. but it was fairly straightforward to make. You know, a lot of the budget went on like foam bats and things like that we could hit him with, and fake cameras and stuff, you know. But it was, you know, I was directing it. I had no first AD. I had no producer as well. Me and Grant kind of shared producing duties on it. But I wouldn't want to do that with all projects. And I'm working with a number of producers on different projects. But I think for this, it kind of worked. And I think it you know, aside from having to lug kit around, which really was taking me back to when I first started making films, you know, carrying like 5 bags through the woods and stuff. It was, I really enjoyed it, and I found it really rewarding. And we managed to get through it all fairly quickly. And I think it just reminded me of like, actually, you don't need a huge amount to make films, but you do need, you know, as long as you've got a good script and good performers.
Yeah.
And a great DP who, the first time I'd worked with David Liddell, you commented on how good it looks. And that is, you know, almost entirely because of David Liddell, who's just an insanely talented Scottish director of photography, who's worked with my sister a lot. She's a filmmaker as well. And he's worked with her a lot, and I've always really admired his work. But her work with him is quite trying to do something together, and you know, we just managed to kind of make this work. But I was so completely sold by him and his talent. He just like it was one of those situations where like a great DP is like someone who you give them an idea and they come up with something even better. It's like, you know,
yeah.
he just like enhanced everything, and he really just took it to another level for me. And I've worked with loads of great DPs, don't get me wrong. But I really connected with David, and I really, I think he did a lot with very little. You know, we had camera, I think we shot in the Red Epic, and then we had, you know, I think we put most of our camera budget into just a really good tripod, and that was it. Like, we didn't have, you know, we had a couple of lights that it was part of his basic kit, but and he had a good set of lenses. But other than that, it was, you know, but that suited our style. I wanted it to be static. I wanted it to feel kind of wide and a bit awkward. So I wasn't looking to do too much movement other than maybe a little bit of handheld stuff. So we didn't really need any kind of grip equipment or that. But I would say partly because it needed to be, but also because we wanted it to be. I think we sort of embraced the limitations in a way,
sure,
which was good.
Absolutely. What are you working on?
Yeah, sorry.
What are you working on now? Do you have things? Obviously, last year and now is difficult, but are you building up to your next thing? What's your sort of future plans?
So I've actually, like, lockdown is actually quite, actually, like, it was quite good for me in a way. It sort of, it gave me a bit of space. I was previously working part-time jobs just to pay the bills in between, like, you know, money I'd make from writing, and I was on furlough for I worked in a theatre, which was obviously really badly affected, and so I was on furlough for a while, which gave me a little bit of space to write. And I went up to see my mum in Orkney just at the beginning of March last year, and then I got stuck there for 3 months because of lockdown, and it really did but right. So I just wrote, but it just so happened that a project I'd been developing for about 3 years was about to go out, and we were looking for a new production partner for that. So I put that out, but I also wrote a spec for my first sort of hour-long kind of TV comedy drama. And I just had the best time doing that because it was really different. I've written quite a lot of TV, like pilots that I've got to various stages, like always really tantalizing. And I've had really good support from producers, production companies, and some commissioners as well. But often it has come down to, like, you know, you've had a project that's been quite similar to another project that's just got a green light ahead of you, or you've had, you know, or you've been developing it with a production company or a commissioner, and then the commissioner changes jobs, and then it's like the bottom falls out of the project. And I've been very close quite a few times, but I've managed to kind of make a living out of it, which has been good most of the time. The last year really has just been writing, and I think it's because I had the space to work on scripts as opposed to treatments as well. And I put out, you know, the first new sort of spec script that I've had in a while, and it really has it's been great. I'm developing it now with BBC Studios, and that's for a 6-part hour-long crime thriller sort of comedy drama, and it's really inspired by like Stand By Me and the kind of crime stuff that I really like, which is quite high detective, Silence of the Lambs, Seven, and it's sort of a twist on the serial killer true crime story, but with like a really irreverent kind of comedic take, and quite a young cast, and it's all set in a very kind of rural area as well, not unlike what you see in Neville is Dead. But it's much more adult, and I think again there was this thing of like a lot of the work I've made that you see online, bar a couple of films, is quite it's something I'm really kind of passionate about. I want to tell stories that everyone can enjoy, but I also really love all the stuff that inspires me, or a lot of the stuff that inspires me is quite adult. And I love horror, I love crime, and I love genre storytelling in general. So I suppose I was kind of keen to sort of to work on something that was maybe a little bit more adult, essentially. So that's one of the projects I've got at the moment, and we're just trying to cast that at the moment, and then we're trying to attach cast, and then we're taking. It's been really exciting. That's been a really good project to work on.
It sounds
but
really.
The other thing is
looking forward to that. I mean, and it will be out through BBC sometime next year or this year.
It's BBC. It's BBC Studios, so it's not. They actually are independent of the BBC, and the great thing about that is it means they can pitch to the BBC, but they also so they do like Good Omens, and which is with Amazon, so they have an ability as an independent studio to kind of go wherever they want. So they could go to Netflix and Amazon, which is exciting, but it's kind of good to see. So but that's I don't really hear much of that at the moment. Occasionally I just get an email and go, this actor's passed, or this person might be, I don't know, this person might be interested or whatever. So that's kind of ongoing, and I'm not having to do a huge amount of that. But the other project I'm working on is my first feature, which I've been developing for 3 years now, on and off. And I've got that to a place where I'm working with a company called Pilia Pictures with Emily Gatto, these two fantastic young Irish producers, and we've teamed up to try and make this film, which is much more, I would say, of a continuation of the kind of sort of family friendly but kind of absurd comedy that you've seen in like Neville is Dead and some of my other work. So that one was easy. That one I direct as well, whereas I might not. It's unlikely I direct the TV series just because of the scale of it and the job and also the fact that I don't have any team. But I think the feature is a much more viable option as my first kind of feature film. It's small, it's set on an island, it's inspired by my family's kind of heritage up in the Orkney Isles and just stories I'd heard about these abandoned islands that there are in this archipelago. And it's really heightened, it's really comedic. I'd liken it kind of tonally to like Hunt for the Wilder People. It's got a great sort of specificity about it. It's very Scottish. But the way that Hunt for the Wilder People is, it's got this, great specificity about it, but you could show it to anyone anywhere in the world and they would totally, enjoy it. You can show it to your gran and she'd love it. It's that kind of thing. But that doesn't mean that it's like lacking any kind of comedic bite. It's funny and it's different. It's really, really, I'm excited about it. And it's got kind of magical realist sort of element to it as well, which is going to be fun. So we're now speaking to Creative Scotland about that, and the plan is to shoot this year or next year. Hoops to jump through before you get to that point. But I have to say it's looking pretty promising, and I'm positive that I think that'll be my first feature. I've written things before. I've written features before that were, really ambitious and just had massive budgets that, there are creatures in them. There were all kinds of, stuff that would just require a hefty budget.
Yeah.
And I always thought I was writing a low budget film, but I think I've learned gradually that actually a low budget film is a low budget film. So I'm kind of, I feel more confident about this one. And
it's difficult. I've heard it many times. And when I've attempted to write things, and again, I don't make any claim to be a writer. Do you know what I mean? But right. I thought, right, okay, well, I want to come up with an idea for like a very low budget film. And then you're writing it, and then you look back, maybe you've had some time away from, you look back and you go, what you've written is like it requires cars and like, you know, explosions
Yeah.
and like different, you know, 6-7 different locations. You're like, you know, it's not a micro budget film at all, you know. It's hard, isn't it?
No, it is hard. And at the same time, I think you shouldn't. I didn't write any of them. I didn't even write my new one trying to think about budget, and I don't think you should in a way. But obviously, it's smart to. I don't know. Like I was writing films that had giants in them and things like that. It was just like, how the hell was I ever going to like write? How was I going to do that? Or like a giant action scene for your third act, you know? Whereas this is like, but it's actually it's quite small and it's quite contained. I mean, essentially, it's 3 characters for the majority of the film, but there's kind of sequences in it that have a bit of scale to them, which, you know, I think is quite achievable on a low budget. So that's, you know, that's the main. That's probably the next thing I'll direct, certainly, or the first thing I'll direct as a feature. But I'm keen to make more shorts as well. Like I think making Neville is Dead, which was actually 2019, it wasn't 2020, so it was a while ago now. But I really enjoyed something about, you know, having people, especially if it's a comedy, is just having people laugh at it. Unfortunately, I've not been able to do that in person. You know, I was really looking forward to last year going to film festivals, and, you know, we had some film festivals lined up, which obviously all of them were postponed or they went online. You know, nothing wrong with going online, great. I really enjoyed, you know, being part of those, and I'm really, you know, grateful to the film festivals. But you know, that's not the ideal way to watch them. You want to, because obviously you're not getting paid to make short films, so it's like the only validation you get, the only thing you get is the validation, really, of like someone connecting with your work. So I was, you know, I have, despite the fact I've not been able to do that in person, it's still been great to, you know, we put this film out and we just got a really nice response online and have people get in touch and say, you know, we enjoyed it. So that's great. And I do just want to continue making more work. And I think I'm going to try and shoot another probably over the next few months. And again, quite similar in sort of budget level, you know, just us kind of mucking together. It's more of a mockumentary, kind of going back to that when we made Pouncer, and I'm looking to sort of improvise the majority of it. I'm going to storyline it, or we are storylining it quite thoroughly, because I don't believe in just sort of making everything up. I want there to be a really strong kind of spine to it. But we're not going to write a script. It's going to be on that in a while. So hopefully we'll get that shot over the next couple of months, and then that'll be another project we'll be able to put out, you know, maybe in time for festivals opening.
Yeah, fingers crossed, and some normality will return. I'll be interested to find out, because you said you also studied in London as well, and you sort of been in London for a period of time in the past. What's making films like in Scotland? Because as I've said in several interviews now, and I've asked filmmakers, that filmmaking in the UK seems to be quite London-centric, be it either for locations or just where things are made. What's filmmaking like in Scotland, and what's the sort of community like? How is it in a good place?
I think we've got a great community, and I think we've got loads of really talented filmmakers, and I think there are opportunities up here in film. In TV, I'm not so sure. I've had much more luck down in development TV wise. Actually, apart from one at the moment, are in London. And so, or London-based production companies. And so the TV industry is very much London-centric, for better or for worse, which was fine when I was living in London. But and actually, to be honest, it doesn't make, you know, I'm just Zooming with people. I'm having general meetings, and the only difference is, from my point of view, is that I don't have to trek across London to have, you know, a 45-minute meeting with someone. Now I just have a Zoom meeting, which is, you know, so there's you know, there's ups and downs, but I definitely think the film industry is quite strong up here, and I think we've had a big overhaul of Screen Scotland over the past couple of years. So like a few years ago, it was SFTN, which is the Scottish Film Talent Network, which are kind of like Scotland's creative development arm for film. And they were great, but they've had a big sort of shake up, and now it's Screen Scotland and Short Circuit. So it's actually a new team, and I'm speaking with them about a new project, and I'm kind of excited to bring in. I've heard of some really exciting stuff getting commissioned as well, and greenlit and funded. So a guy I studied with, Scottish filmmaker called Andrew Cumming, is in post-production for his first feature film called The Origin. And I just think it sounds hugely exciting. It's a monster movie, and it's set in prehistoric times, and it just sounds, it's quite ambitious for, you know, it's not historically what Creative Scotland have put out. I think there's not been a huge amount, and the odd comedy, and you know, which they've all been brilliant. It's just that there's a kind of filmmaking I'm interested in, and a lot of my peers are interested in, was genre filmmaking, and also stuff that, you know, would you know, could really appeal to to mass audiences in that way. So I'm excited to see that they commissioned that, and that, you know, sorry, that they'd actually funded that, and that it was, you know, it was going ahead. I felt like that's sort of, it's the kind, I think we're, you know, but aside from that, there's loads of fantastic filmmakers in Scotland who are making, you know, really exciting work. But yeah, in terms of TV, I don't know, you know, hopefully that's changing as well. And maybe there is more being made. For a while, it felt like, I guess I'm kind of thinking quite specifically of comedy. But for a while, it felt like it was the one production company that were making the same kind of comedy, and definitely more kind of input from different companies now, and that's kind of exciting. I suppose the other thing is, like, just speaking about like making films in Scotland, I think it's easier to do what I did with Neville is Dead in Scotland than it is in London, because I think it's so expensive to live in London that it's harder to get people to do work for reduced rate, basically, to try, you know, I want to pay people what they're owed. But when you're doing like completely independent film, where it's like you're all just kind of mucking it on Neville is Dead, it was easier to pay them the token fee than it would have been in London, where you also have to justify just the expense of getting about and kind of, you know, living in London. I think there's like, I just remember this feeling when I was in London that I was like, I have to be busy all the time because I have to justify how much I'm spending on my rent, and the fact that I'm working 3 jobs, and, you know, that pressure kind of lifted when I went home. And now I'm, you know, I'm having that space to having that space to be able to kind of work. And I think, as I said, it's easier to get collaborators as well to work on something that's maybe not the most financially kind of like rewarding project, but ultimately could be really creatively rewarding. So that's a big difference as well. But no, I think we're doing really good stuff in Scotland. I mean, from what I can see, but I'm not, again, you know, during lockdown, I've not been going to any festivals and meeting people and things like that. So I'm maybe not the best person to ask. I don't know.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, you're in Scotland and you're making films, and you know, filmmakers, so you're going to have an interesting point of view. But yeah, I get what you're saying in terms of it's probably easier to do more creative things where you are, where it doesn't cost £20 just to turn up on set, sort of thing, you know.
Yeah.
What would you say would help filmmakers in your position these days, in from an industry point of view, just from technology point of view? What is the thing that, if something could change or something be changed, or that would just help you and other people like yourself make stuff and get stuff seen and ultimately get paid, you know?
Yeah. I don't know. I think, you know, I can only speak for myself personally, because I think everyone's dealing with different challenges. I think for myself, I've always, I guess maybe one thing I've struggled with is meeting collaborators sometimes, meeting new collaborators, and meeting producers. And I think I had more luck going through my agent and just kind of like sending a script out. But sometimes I wish, and I've been to a lot of kind of networking events and things like that, and sometimes I wish it was easier just to meet producers and kind of, you know, and figure out whether you might want to collaborate on something. But there's that, so I feel like I can't say that that's something like there's loads of people already trying to solve that problem. I guess like it'd be good to see more stuff that's developed go through development and then kind of have a route towards production, because often it feels like it's maybe more easy to secure development finance than it is to actually have something that's to see a route to production finance. I also think, for actually a big thing for me that I would say is it's really hard to get that TV or film when you're being constantly told, well, you don't have the experience, but you can only get the experience by someone at some point basically taking a bit of a punt on you.
Exactly. Yeah,
and that is really tricky, because I've been in a couple of situations recently where that's basically what they've said. And it's like, I know, I've not always been ready. I think I probably thought I was ready like 5-8 years ago. I've been like, yeah, I could do it. I really do genuinely think I could do it now. Like I know I can do it. I know I've got, and I'm generally quite self-effacing because I'm Scottish, but I do think there's I know that I could do it now. And I think it is really frustrating being in that position where you're kind of like, you're not being considered in the same run of other people because they've maybe had, a TV credit or a film credit. Yeah. And I don't want to undersell the importance of that, because obviously the experience is really important. It's just frustrating to be in that position where it's like, it's just catch-22, isn't it?
Sure.
I'd like to see more people taking chances in positions of power. I'd like to see commissioners kind of, and I'm sure, and they are with loads of people. And I'm sure the other thing is there's only so many opportunities to go around, I suppose. So, but from speaking purely from my own experience, I'd love to see that. I'd love to see, people taking chances on first-time directors more. But having said that, I should say as well, I've also heard of loads of people who were in my position, who'd made a bunch of shorts, who had things like that. So there are people taking chances, and I think that's great. Just more of them, please.
Sure. No, I agree. I don't want to tempt the Zoom gods too much more because we've been okay. So I'll wrap up by asking basically if anyone's interested in what you're saying so far, which I'm sure they are, and just follow your career and what you do. What's the best way for people to contact you, find you, social media, website, all that sort of stuff?
So your best bet's probably through, I'm not great on social media actually. I've got an Instagram and I've got a Twitter. Twitter's probably the best way to go. Even though I got contacted by someone recently and they had to contact me another way because I realized that I didn't check my DMs or whatever. So I'm getting better at that. If you want to get in contact, Twitter's probably the best way. Yeah,
sure.
I will check it.
Sure, I'll put your links up. Do you want to just mention what your Twitter is?
I think it's Louis Paxton 8, the number 8. I think that's it. But maybe double check that because I might be wrong. But this shows you how bad at social media I am. But I'm getting better. I'm trying.
Sure, don't worry. I'm following you on Twitter, so I can double check. That's not a problem. Last question. If you could go back as many years as you wish, a year, 2 years, 10 years, when you first started sort of doing this, based on what you know now, would you change your process of what you've done, or would you sort of keep it the same?
I don't know. I guess I don't think about that too much. I think I'd maybe try and have a little bit more confidence in myself. I think I'd try and maybe, but then maybe, you learn necessarily as well. So I think actually I had quite a hard time in my MA at film school. And I think I felt I wasn't entirely proud of a lot of the films that I made there. But now I look back on it, I think, but I learned so much on them. And so I suppose in a way it's just allow yourself to learn. Maybe that's you don't, you'll make mistakes. And also just trust in development. I was really, really against script development and against notes basically, which is just because I was hugely insecure. But being forced to do a lot of criticism, forced to have a lot of criticism at uni, was it just, you know, it gave me a thicker skin. And so I'm now like, more notes, give me more. Because when I was younger, just, you know, don't be so insecure and take the note. That's maybe it. You know?
Sure. No, that's probably very true. I want to thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been great. And yeah, thank you for putting the film online as well. I really appreciate, you know, you spreading the word about it, because it really does make a difference. So thank you.